Let's talk about the implied imperialism of a globalized marketplace where goods or services are primarily acquired on price alone, and how strategic relationships helps you better understand these situations and provide value to individuals. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. First off, the United States and most developed countries tend to buy their products and services, especially food product, from developing countries or countries that have communist or socialist systems. Let me give you an example. The United States imports a large volume of product from China. China imports a large volume of product from North Korea. We purchase in the United States our grapes, for example, from Chile, and our beef from Venezuela. Understand this is a factor primarily when price is the primary objective for making a buying decision. So if you're looking at just the price of the product, and you're not looking at the quality, you're not looking at the long-term durability, you're not looking at the environmental conditions in which the product is produced or developed, those countries that are socialist and communist are more able to force the labor at rates that are globally compatible. In fact, China has undercut pricing in order to get into certain markets. But overall, understanding that on price alone, there tends to be some disadvantage. The social equities are not there when consumers make buying decisions on price alone. Venezuela can assign a centrally planned socialist government can assign laborers to go get the beef. China can assign laborers or set up special manufacturing districts in order to produce products and goods at a lower cost because of environmental factors. Now, if we look at regulation, for example, California, you couldn't set up a car manufacturing plant in California that produced the amount of waste that a car manufacturing plant in Mexico or China produces. It's just cost prohibited because of the fines and the laws. However, the citizens of California are comfortable buying the same product from a country that has this hidden waste stream. This is what I'm getting at here. When we talk about tracing beneficial interests as part of a strategic relations element to understand how systems work, we start to see that the same people who protest on social justice, the same people that are woke about human rights issues, the same people that are pushing climate change as we must save the world, are ignoring the consumption of goods in their own homes that contributes to these factors that could otherwise be mitigated if they were willing to spend a little bit more for a product or service. Or if they can't spend a little bit more, if they were willing to go without a product or service. You'll see it in nearly every protest. People running around with their iPhones, their Android phones, taking pictures of the protest action, uploading videos to social media platforms. They will complain about the imperialism of the United States and how the government should be disbanded and police should be disbanded, not understanding the value of the concept that they have themselves contributed to what they have not wanted. Now, we push heavily in the Inside Strategic Relations program on self-introspect. So, for example, if we're looking at a food system where we're buying beef from Venezuela, we saw what Venezuelan government has done to its own citizens. We understand that the system of communism, of central planning, has unintended consequences. And we still buy our beef from Venezuela, but we could be buying our beef from U.S. farmers. The same U.S. farmers that had to destroy animals in order to cash out their insurance when the economy got shut down during COVID, and fast food chains and restaurants that would normally buy a large, consistent volume of meats couldn't buy the meats. Yet we're still importing cheaper meats from outside the United States to satisfy consumer demand while beef is being destroyed in the United States. Now, same thing happened with pork. The same thing happened with grains and vegetables. A pork product produced in the United States is going to cost more. That's because the labor is getting better benefits and better protection. The transportation companies are not just freezing the meat and then running it around in freight containers. There's actually a trucker moving that meat for market. Now, the trucker doesn't have to move the meat as far, and they don't have to use as much energy to move the meat. And some farmers even sell direct to the marketplace. But it is a situation where the costs are slightly higher, but it's a better product. It isn't meat that's been in a ship for 30 days and sometimes thawing out and being refrozen. It's not a product that uses human waste to fertilize it. It uses fertilizers or no fertilizer at all. One of the things about organic and near organic product is that it costs a little bit more because no pesticides, no herbicides, no harmful chemical fertilizer was used on this product. And therefore, while you may have similar yields, the quality of the product as far as appearance is not as good, and consumers don't buy it as quickly. So the audience isn't big enough. Now, if the consumer understands that the nutritional value is higher in that fruit or vegetable or farm to table product, they would understand they don't need to buy as many of the product, and so they can survive with the quality that comes out and actually benefit from the quality that comes out. But the same thing happens with vehicles. Tesla started manufacturing in California. And now they have manufacturing plants in China and other places as well, but they are manufacturing in California, creating a premium product that, by the way, is not as environmentally friendly as people would say it is. Electric cars require a lot of carbon up front. They also require a lot of harmful rare earth chemicals and rare earth minerals that are being literally farmed by slaves or mined by slaves in Africa. We find a system that people will protest, this imperialistic system they're calling it, which is basically fair market capitalism. But the people who are protesting don't understand that what they're asking for is to become a slave that produces and feeds the system they don't want. See, if we had socialism in the United States, the government could decide that our labor costs were too high, and that this $15 minimum wage or this living wage is all that you can get. And those who can get more, well, they'll get taxed and it'll be taken away and given to others. And then essentially we'll become the slaves that produce for other countries. Now, something works differently here if you're like the president of Ghana and you say, we're not going to take your money. We're not going to borrow your money. So sometimes a developing country will borrow money in order to set up an industry, and that borrowed money must be paid back, and it becomes part of a subsidy that makes it possible to sell the goods at a lower than market rate. And then at a lower than market rate, they gain market share, which ensures the ability to pay back the funds. But then something happens, corruption in government, misallocation of resources, and then now that country has to give up land to the people who lent them money. It's a vicious cycle. We can go into that in another point. My key point here is, if you build affluence in what you do, meaning you create value for the marketplace, charge a fair price, help your customers benefit, and you have a fair exchange between individuals, not some government monitoring your contract, but a fair exchange between individuals, the tendency to, through enlightened self-interest, both parties benefiting or not doing a deal at all, you'll actually be in a situation where things will cost more. That's true. But there'll be more opportunities for individuals to get paid. So, for example, the farm workers, rather than having to sneak in illegal immigrants to farm, and this is what happens a lot of times, by the way, the illegal immigrants are incentivized to come to the United States to work difficult farm jobs under the excuse that Americans won't work that job, and then being paid less than basic wages, and being paid even worse, in many cases treated like slaves, and then often sent home through a simple call to the ICE or some other service to come pick up these folks at the end of the season and take them back to whatever country they came from. Now, if you contrast that with a legal port of entry to get a market wage job, our foods and vegetables go up. The prices go up, yes. But where does that money go? That's the beneficial tracing. If we have to pay a little bit more for fruits and vegetables and we're a little bit closer to the farmer and the market crops come in during season, then more of that money actually goes to the farmer and it goes to the people who are working those fields. And those individuals get the result that other people are protesting for, but they get the result through a fair market system where they're legally entered the country. So if they decide they don't want to work for that farmer, they're not bound by a work visa. They're not bound by not having the right paperwork. They're not bound by a system that makes it illegal for them to move around. Now, open borders, if you say, okay, well, we're just going to open the borders, anybody can come over here, well, then you lose the ability to keep track of who can vote and who can't vote. And that's more leaning towards a global government. That's leading more towards a smaller elite ruling a larger group. If you have state boundaries, if you have national boundaries, if you have a entry system of visas where you have an idea who's in the country and who's out of the country, you have better protection when it comes to viral outbreaks. You have better protection when it comes to custody issues. You don't have people grabbing their kids and running to another country without their spouse knowing. You have a better control when it comes to illegal activities. And you also have better control when it comes to taxing and it comes to the system of voting. But ultimately, it's a very complex issue that if you don't take the time to sit down and look at, you may say imperialism is bad. Conquering and colonializing countries is bad. Well, it might be bad. But then again, if those countries are given the autonomy to say who can come and go in their country, and they're given the autonomy to produce goods and services relevant to their local and regional markets, then what will happen is those areas will grow quickly. They'll gain a better quality of life. They'll gain access to more goods and services. And they'll be able to do so at a lower environmental impact. Now, here's what's important to understand. Globalism is not bad. It is not bad that we can buy goods and services from China. And these goods and services, by the way, are better than they might have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And while the quality is poor compared to other options, the quality is much better compared to what things used to be like. Environmental problems, yes, they have environmental problems, but those environmental problems no different than any other developing country had during the Industrial Revolution. Now, are they right or wrong? Well, if they were able to adopt the same technology that would make that solution environmentally friendly in the United States, and they were adopting it in a foreign country, then the prices would normalize. So globalization is not the problem. Globalization is just a means of distribution. And if you start tracing things out, if you had an equal environmental share, if you had an equal equity in payment of individuals, if you had an equal distribution of control, meaning it's not some central government forcing people to work, it was individuals deciding to work in areas that they want and being able to negotiate their own wages, then you would have a normalization of prices across the planet, and we'd pretty much pay the same thing for the product, and the differentiating factor would be distance from the source. When it comes to what's being called imperialism or a capitalism that overcomes other countries, well, I see that countries would want to adopt different cultures and behaviors, and in order to do so, they can make a voluntary exchange of goods and services. So Guyana decides it wants to own and control the natural resources of its land. So these resources are being mined by foreign governments, and they're being the raw resources are exiting the country with very little benefit to the citizen, whose land is often destroyed, whose homes are often disturbed, and who are forced to work in horrible conditions. If they had the ability to refine those materials in their home country and value add those materials in export, they would also improve and be better citizens and be better contributors to the world. The real imperialism that should be stopped is a country coming in using loan schemes, using aid programs, using political influence in order to punish a country into cheap labor. If you're thinking about these things and you're mapping out beneficial interests, you will often see the loudest protesters aren't improving things. They're actually reinforcing systems that benefit a very small number of people. Inside strategic relations is about benefiting the maximum number. It's creating mutual interests, creating mutual gain, and doing so for the maximum number of people. Now, does that mean everybody? No, it does not mean everybody. It means that you're going to have your network and someone else is going to have their network, and your network's going to benefit, their network's going to benefit, but collectively you might be benefiting in two different areas. And in fact, you may be mutually benefiting each other. It is a local, state, federal, and global interaction, not just a single global interaction or a single federal interaction. Will there be conflicts? Yes, there will always be conflicts. Some people will take over marketplaces by force. Some people will take over marketplaces by joint venture or cooperation. And some will take over marketplaces through being invited as part of a means of improving the area. Now, there is no right and wrong in this. There's simply understanding, does what you do influence for the larger outcome? And does what you do actually make a difference? Because again, these protesters are running around with iPhones. They're driving their Kia, or they're driving their Prius, or they're driving their vehicle that was otherwise contributing to the things that they wish not to contribute. If it was true that humans impact the environment so much, then these protesters would be riding bicycles to their locations, and those bicycles would be made out of bamboo using recycled materials. And that just doesn't happen. If public transportation could really save us all, we would have put more investment into public transportation. We would not have wanted the independence of vehicles. And you can't say, well, the vehicle companies had the conspiracy to stop public. No. As you as a citizen makes a decision to buy locally versus having something imported across around the world, you as a citizen decides to walk instead of drive. You as a citizen could make your own damn clothes if you really wanted to. And some people do, by the way. We made a commitment here only to buy used furniture. It turns out you can go to consignment shops and get high quality used furniture, and sometimes they're called antiques. You can actually go and get quality used clothing at the Goodwill store, and your contribution to Goodwill actually helps Goodwill. The underlying perspective here is that with strategic relationships, you have the ability to do the beneficial tracing to know that this advocacy group is actually not benefiting the people who it professes to help. You can read about economists like Walter Williams, who did studies to determine that some of these myths about oppression are not actually true, and they're laws layered on top of laws actually do the opposite of what they were intended to do. I could go into this quite a bit, and in fact, if you want a practical implementation of beneficial tracing, you can contact my offices at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. And if you send in your questions, sometimes I'll have an opportunity to talk with you about your unique situation, and you can see practical examples about, we are, for example, we're embargoing China in many ways and adding tariffs to their goods and services coming in. Then to fund our own industry, we're borrowing money from China through a treasury system. So we're not giving them the businesses money direct. We're now giving the government of China money direct. We talk about individual freedoms and the rights of privacy when it comes to your access on the internet, yet we install in cities cameras with facial recognition, and we have government programs that can listen in on your telephone calls. So some of these things will start to be more clear when you're using beneficial tracing. If you've got questions on using beneficial tracing, please contact my offices, and we'll be happy to answer them in another podcast. And if you're upset about what I've shared today, or even confused, I'd like to hear from you as well. That way we can clear those things up, because It really is crazy when you understand strategic relations to see other people do things that are no way going to help them. And then you start to ask the question, well, is it on purpose or is it through ignorance? Well, if it's through ignorance, we can fix it. If it's on purpose, we have to approach it differently. But I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations, here to help you transform business relationships into profits. And those profits very often are not just monetary profits. They're very often relationship-based in the wellness of individuals and the building of communities. And I'd like to help you do such. And you can visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com to get started. Thanks for listening.